Welcome back to another episode of the Urban Guru Podcast, where we feature insights from artists and professionals of color. On today's podcast, we'll have a conversation with artist, musician, and author Javier Barrios. Today, he joins us to discuss his debut dark fantasy novel, Tenebris, The Unholy Darkness. It's his take on the story of creation. So stay tuned for another informative and entertaining episode of the Urban Guru Podcast. So we have you, and one of the reasons that I really wanted to talk to you, besides knowing you for several years, is that you have a new book out, and the name of the book is
Tenebris, The Unholy Darkness.
And what genre is that? Just tell us a little bit about your book.
It's like dark fantasy adventure. So Tenebris depicts an alternate version of Earth, starting with a twist on the classic creation mythology. And it follows a group of ancient reptilian beings who are forced to flee their home and find a new world, a promised land of sorts. And once they're there, they have to come to terms with the fact that they are not alone in existence, and it becomes a tale of corruptions of power, the corruption of religion, greed. It's just kind of the fallout of what these pillars can do to a society.
Wow. And having read it, it's like it's a very layered story. There's a lot of things involved in your answer. So we're going to unpack all of that eventually. But just listening to you, one of the first things I wanted to ask you is I also see that you say you are a writer at heart, or a poet at heart.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit, how did your writing journey begin? Did you always write? Were you writing from a young age? Were you once sit in class and you wrote stories in the background? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so pretty much as early as I could put pen to paper, I've been telling stories. I have faint memory of drawing like little doodles and going to my family and telling them the story in the drawings. And as I got older and learned to write, I'll draw pictures with maybe like a one sentence caption underneath, and so on and so forth until I was just writing words. It's always just been a calling or a passion to just tell stories. And I specifically remember at a young age watching Stephen King's Pet Sematary. And I remember there's the funeral scene where Stephen King makes a cameo, and he's like the pastor. And my brother Daniel pointed out to me like, oh, that's Stephen King. He wrote the book for this movie. And I remember thinking like, wow, that's so cool. Like he writes the books and he's in the movies. And I think it's kind of like from there where I got into my head that I want to do that. I want to write stories. I would love to make movies and be in it or something. As a kid, the idea was I want to become Stephen King. And now that I'm older, I want to be, something different than that. But that is the original spark.
That's fantastic. And those original stories, so they were just like little short stories. Were you dabbling and trying to do your own little comics, and what was your family's response when you would present these things to them?
I don't exactly remember, like I'm sure they were like encouraging, and it's like, oh, it's cute, he's drawing something, he's excited about this. So they're all very encouraging about that. There's only one in particular I remember, and it's because I have it somewhere in my closet. It was called the Green Ostrich, which is kind of like your traditional story of a character who's kind of different and an outcast because of that. And then moral of the story is it doesn't matter what you look like, kind of thing. I think it was taking the idea of like green eggs and ham. That's why the ostrich is green or something. Not sure.
So it sounds like from an early age you were into expression, being yourself, maybe.
Oh yeah.
One of your early inspirations then were you wanted to be like Stephen King. Now, you said you watched Pet Sematary. Did you actually read any of his books when you were younger?
I guess the same story. I do remember my brother Daniel reading Pet Sematary to me as a kid. Not the whole thing, but he read some of it. it wasn't until I got much older where I started reading his books. I know the very first one I read was Cujo when I was in the seventh grade.
Mm,
I did a little project on that one. I've always loved writing and I've always loved books. It was definitely not until an older age where I actually started getting into reading them specifically.
mm.
I know I used to have a lot of fun as a kid going to the library and checking out all these books that I would never read, but I always liked just having them.
So,
So yeah,
yeah.
at that early age, I was going through all the Stephen King fandom by watching all the movies, and
Mm.
then once I got into my 20s, I started reading those books. I already loved the movie, and then like you get almost like the director's cut in a way. It's just more content. I guess the writer's cut.
And I happen to know, since you were watching Stephen King and you said you wanted to be Stephen King, that you dabbled in video production and learning how to
Yes.
do that. Tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about that.
yeah, so I guess part of like my writing journey, as a kid, I had always wanted to write, and I know my dad was like encouraging in a way of, he wanted me to express myself, and I know in middle school there was a book that I was trying to write, which every time I wrote different scenes, I'd always read it to him. But overall, I know he would rather me have aspirations to do something more traditional, and so I had it in my head that being an author was, kind of like a fantasy, almost like, becoming like a Hollywood movie star or something. And so I disregarded that dream for quite a few years in high school. And in 10th grade, I had the chance to go out of my school to the Arlington Career Center, which I took the class for TV productions, and I really enjoyed it. It was easy, it was fun, and it was something I could do. And so I kind of focused on that for a while. Took TV productions too. My senior year, I took it a third time, but since there wasn't a third installation of that class, I was given an internship, and that's how I ended up meeting you.
Yes,
Uh,
my
yeah, and
deep
that
dark
was
secret.
yeah, it was a really good time, and for a while I was thinking that that was what I was gonna do. It seemed like a very easy career choice, and um, I had fun with it, and it was very easy for me. And I was pretty good at it. And then just at some point, my passions weren't, I guess, there, and I remember coming to you and telling you how I wanted to I guess, stop working with AETV because it's not what I wanted to do.
Mhm,
And that's when you started digging into, well, what is it that I want to do?
mhm,
And then I'm pretty sure I told you the story of being a little kid telling these stories, and
mhm.
you said the very simple but igniting thing of, it sounds like you're supposed to be a writer, and it's kind of taken my life since then,
Mhm.
in the best of ways. Yeah.
Be careful of advice you give to people, huh?
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, those are interesting days, and of course, what you're talking about is for a time I worked with third level students, like you
Mhm.
said, who had taken the first level TV classes, so they would do the internship full year with me. Yeah, I remember the conversation, and it's like, yeah, you really sounded like you wanted to be a writer. Now, I also know that you were also dabbling in music too.
Oh, yes. And that's, storytelling in a different medium.
Hmm.
I big fan of music of all kinds. I remember wanting to play electric guitar because everyone wants to play electric guitar. And I remember telling my friend Jerry, like, oh, I want to, like, I saved up some money. Let's go and buy a guitar. And he told me, like, no, everyone wants to be guitarists. When it comes down to make a band, no one has a bassist. You should do bass. Yeah, I don't know, 16, 17 years later, I've still been playing the bass. And it was fun. I remember with a couple of my high school friends, trying to form a band, and we were wanting to form something of a grunge band. We had a lead guitarist, a rhythm guitarist, a singer, and me as the bassist, and I was writing some of the lyrics. But with Howard, who was the rhythm guitarist of that project, or that idea, I guess. You can't even call it a project. He and I, over the years, have, started trying to form other bands, seeing what works. We tried a psychedelic band that we did a song together, and that was essentially it from that, until eventually we just started working together. Him playing guitar, me singing. It's been a decade-long journey since then.
Twinkling stars glowing in the trees, the little green light smiled down on me. It was in middle of summer on a cool breezy night, when I saw these creatures taking flight.
I've written plenty of songs together, and we have some big ideas coming up soon.
Well, you're a creator. You're a writer.
Yeah.
You express yourself through different, like you said, different mediums. It's either writing, songwriting, playing an instrument. You even did it, like you said, with the video. You're a really good videographer. So yeah, you're a creative person. You're a creative soul.
Yeah, like I don't know how much stock you can put into zodiac signs or whatever, but I'm a Sagittarius, which I guess is supposed to be, artistic or creative. And I'm definitely an artist, at heart, which, any medium in that form I enjoy. I take a lot of passion in.
And I'm curious, and you kind of hinted at it, but just talking about the different types of ways of expressing yourself, have you found yourself combining the art forms or expressions together?
About 3 years ago, I started developing my drawing skills more, because I've always enjoyed drawing, but never been happy with the level of drawing I could do. So I've been working on that a lot, and at some point, I realized, why am I just drawing all these random creatures that I'm drawing, where I could be drawing stuff that are specific to Tenebris. And from there I started practicing drawing the serpenoids and other creatures that might be in there. I guess I know originally I wanted there to be more artwork in this version of Tenebris. But I don't know, I was definitely very eager to have it done and get it out, since I'd been working on it since 2009 and 2008. And so there's still some artwork, and I kind of like how I did it with just the beginning of each section has some art, but maybe in the second one there might be a little more art involved in there.
This is a trilogy, right?
A potential trilogy for
Yeah.
sure. A duo, because the story as a whole has been cut in half. So there's at least 2 installations for Tenebris.
As you were talking about including more images, I'm with the group here in the Atlanta area, and one of the things we talk about are the different ways and the different medias you can use to help, round out that world of your book. There are all kind of things you can do. There's all kind of social media posts. You can do Instagram. You're talking about doing pictures and stuff like that. There are all kind of different ways that you can now put ancillary materials out that go along with your books. So even for this current one, it's still possible to have images and stuff out there that's attached to it. So it's a really good time to be particularly an independent creator. Are you an outliner and a planner, or are you a pantser? Do you like to jump in and just start writing and see where it goes? Or are you a mixture of both?
I'm now becoming a mixture of both.
Mhm.
I'm definitely more of a pantser than an
Ah,
outliner. I'm a very like chaotic person. I like to just do things, and it's kind of difficult for me to set the certain boundaries of sitting down, doing an outline, and
mhm,
uh, I don't know, for whatever reason, it kind of makes it harder for me to get the vision, which
mhm,
is kind of ironic. But I have found with how long it's taken me to write the Unholy Darkness that when I started putting all the documents together, since I wrote basically each chapter, each section separately, and once it came down to, all right, I need to have it all in one document and read it all the way through to figure out the continuity of little details. And what helped me with that was doing the table of contents.
mhm,
And for each chapter, just doing like a quick sentence of what I want to happen or what
mhm,
should be happening within that chapter.
mhm,
And that's definitely what I'm using for my next novel, that idea. And even I'm also working on a book of an anthology of horror stories that I'm trying to finish up soon.
mhm,
And what's helped me with that is doing the table of contents of
mhm,
like, here are ideas of stories. So every now and then, when I want to write something, but not specifically work on a project I already have open, I just go to that table of contents,
mhm,
read the titles, and it's like, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to work on this one today.
mhm.
I guess it's more like writing prompts in a way. Just like here's a quick name for a story. You haven't written anything about this, but this potentially could be a story. So later on, go that and like, oh yeah, I like that. Let me work on this.
It's interesting that even as a pantser, somebody who likes to dive in, you've come around for yourself with coming around to what you said are writing prompts. And like I said, I like the fact that you use that term because that's basically what I do. I
Mhm.
I guess you can call me more of an outliner, but what I do is more what you just said. I'll have the idea for the book. I'll come up with, roughly how many chapters is going to be in there. And I basically do like a short paragraph, or not paragraph, just a sentence or two of what I feel should happen in this
Yeah.
chapter. And so when I sit down to write, like you said, those are my writing prompts. And of course, things change, but as things change, then I go and I change the remaining ones until I just finish that first draft. I've been there before. My
Mhm.
second book, I decided to not do it that way and just write. And I found out that I had like three different stories. So I had to push a whole bunch of stuff out and just keep one. So I know for myself, I'm more like you said, I have to have the writing prompts, some kind of
Mhm.
loose idea for where I'm going to go. So when I sit down, that kind of does it for me. And then I'm free to do what I want to do. And if I need to make changes as I go along, I make changes. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I know for the longest time I wrote Tenebris in a linear
Mhm,
fashion of like, okay, I'm starting at the beginning and I'm just gonna write until the end. And that's how I've always written things,
mhm,
which um, does take a lot more time because there's definitely certain scenes that I'm really eager to work on, but that's not going to happen much later into the story.
mhm,
And my mentor had put it really in a really good way of, well, if this is what you want to write now, why don't you write it now? And so I then started doing that. That's how I started just
mhm,
writing, skipping around in the timeline. And I feel like the integrity of the work is better that way because
mhm,
that's my passion's in that part of the story, so I
mhm,
should work on that first. And I know when I was in middle school working on a what I wanted to be my first book was like a Greek mythology inspired thing. It took me about 5 years to write, but yeah, it took me a long time to write. It was mostly like I kept getting into writer's block of like, oh, I'm not sure where to go from here. I don't know where to go from here. And now doing in this style of just working on different chapters and then eventually putting it together definitely seems to help speed up that
mhm.
process or avoid the writer's block.
Yeah. I've taught the writing classes and screenwriting classes, and it's like one of the biggest things is that writer's block. And again, for me, being slightly more of an outliner, I find that having those prompts ready, it's much easier for me to sit down during a writing session and go with that
Mhm.
prompt as opposed to get to the writing session and not, like you said, not know where you want to go. And so for me, having just, like you said, even that rough table of contents outline, writing prompts is one way for me to keep the writer's block from really happening. At least I can get a first draft out. And we're going to get into the book, particularly with the mythology and the religion and things like that. But how did you first start with this book?
Well, I've mentioned, I guess, that I've always wanted to write a book. And I know, like, let's see, when I was in fifth grade, it was my first attempt of writing a book, which was really just like a few paragraphs, maybe a couple pages. It was called Symbiotes, which was essentially a big ripoff of Night of the Creeps, or uh, was it or Slither, I guess, if people are from my generation and don't know 80s pop culture. Um, but yeah, that didn't go anywhere. And then in middle school, I tried doing like this Greek mythology type thing, which, as I mentioned, took several years to do. As far as I could remember, there was a story that I used to just think of these humanoid beings that had the features of snakes, or specifically cobras. And they were kind of like the disciples of the devil, or as time went on, they weren't, disciples of the devil, but like a different faction of creatures in hell. And then just over the many years, I've always like, thought more about that, involved it more. And by the time I got to ninth grade in high school, I remember seeing the movie Kingdom of Heaven for the first time. And it was kind of like, hey, you're always trying to like write a book and you keep starting these books that you have no idea what you want to do with them. There's that one story that you think of just about every single night of like your entire life. Why don't you do that, and kind of make it in the Crusade style. And so that's how Tenebris, that's how the Unholy Wars first came into being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what the original title of this story was. I changed it from the Unholy Wars because I guess eventually I decided I wanted to split the story in two. I
Mm-hmm.
thought it would be less intimidating for a new author to sell a smaller book than a big chunky one. And so I split it into two, and I can't call it the Unholy Wars since the war itself doesn't start until the second book.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I believe bouncing these ideas off with you at one point. You told me to look up the how do you say Latin in dark, or how do you say darkness in Latin? So I looked that up, and it's Tenebris, which is a pretty neat, cool title.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like the umbrella. That's how the umbrella of Tenebris came for this slash these stories. Because I definitely would like to at some point, if even if I don't do a third unholy book, I would really like to do maybe something of an anthology book of different perspectives in the different timelines within the world that I am creating here. And so I can just keep using the name Tenebris to kind of
Mm-hmm.
add more things onto there.
And one of the things I find interesting is the fact that you're dealing with mythology, you're dealing with religion, you were dealing with the idea of heaven and hell, and a lot of people's concept of heaven and hell, and what a devil is, what fallen angels, all of these things, even the nature of God. And so I'm really curious because I know you mentioned inspiration from movies, and definitely, I guess most people may or may not realize it, but horror movies have a lot of metaphysical content in them.
Oh yeah.
Sci-fi and fantasy also, but horror seems to have a lot in there, particularly with certain filmmakers who tend to know it and put those things in there. Where do you think that inspiration came from, and where did your knowledge of all these things come from? Because, like you said, you're heavy in the mythology and religion in this book. So, where did all of that knowledge come from?
Well, as a kid, I was raised Catholic, very traditional for us Hispanic Americans. Catholicism does really control most of our countries,
Mhm.
and I remember finding it curious that Lucifer, the who is depicted as this like the most gorgeous angel of all the angels, so divine, is also the exact same character as the devil, who is depicted in a completely different visual of like this monstrous beast, usually like horned, you know, sometimes like hooved foot or hoofed feet creature. And I always liked thinking that, like, well, why is the devil and Lucifer the same person, yet there's these two different depictions of them? And, maybe possibly they are two different entities
Mhm.
that, through time, the way how storytelling works, have just been morphed into the same one.
Mhm.
What if hell had two different rulers, and they were these two, the bestial creature of the devil, quote unquote, or, and then also this divine angelic being, Lucifer. What if they both were in control of hell or the underworld? And
Mhm.
that's kind of one of the foundations of the story is taking some of those biblical elements and I guess digging more into it. I know the Bible doesn't really speak much about hell, and pretty sure the most of what we as a whole think of hell comes from Dante's Inferno and not from actual like religious texts. Um, so I try to make my own version of that with using some of the ideas that people have already put into place. Like the traditional visual of hell being this fiery, desolate wasteland, which very interestingly was what our world looked like at one point in time.
So there's that deeper cosmology, if you want to
Yeah,
say. You did grow up Catholic, so you had that religious background.
yeah.
And then from there, you just started asking questions. How young were you when you started wondering about these things?
Pretty young. I was definitely in elementary school. I remember maybe when I was in fourth grade, one of my brothers, Fernando, started to become a Jehovah's Witness, which is a little more involved of a sector of the Christian faith. Um, and so he specifically would have these like little Bible studies with me, which I don't know. It's kind of funny because it just gave me more questions because it I guess it changed from here's the Catholic Bible and now here's the Jehovah's Witness Bible, and it helped me as a I don't know an intellectual to start seeing the holes in what religion has, I guess. And that's also a theme of Tenebris is why do we have religion? If you look more into it, a lot of it seems to point fingers towards having a higher rule over the lesser, and that's a big point that I'm trying to flesh out in Tenebris of the dangers of having religion, where like it's nice and it can bring hope, it can bring people a sense of belonging, um, but then on a greater scale, what else does it do? I mentioned how um, the Latin America is heavily influenced by Catholicism, which is kind of odd if you think about it, since the original beings, the original people of those worlds, the Aztecs, the Mayas, the Incans, they all worshipped nature. They worshipped the sun. They worshipped the sky, and it's so strange that us of a people that came from something which was a lot more grounded, to now we're like these very like strictly devoted, like, no, you have to go to church, you're supposed to like do this, do that. But it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why would I want to follow my oppressors? Why do I want the colonizers to be giving me this insight of, first they're gonna tell me I'm savage, I'm dirty, I'm worthless, and then it's like, oh, but God will save me if I read this stuff, which, like, it's seems like a very um for an entity like this god, it seems very micromanagey for, yeah, a being that has so much power. Like, why would they care what I do with the world they've given me?
And it's very interesting, because there's materials coming out. Um, I talked with another author about this. There, books, original source documents. There you go. From people who came over here, Spanish, Portuguese, whatever, and they documented what they saw and what they encountered when they got here. And it speaks to what you just said about the religions, the level of technology, the level
Mhm.
of knowledge. They were shocked by some of the things, and they recorded it all. But so many of those things are now being made available because they're being scanned, they're being put on archives. You can purchase them, PDFs, you can get downloads, and you can go and see what they saw when they first came here before all of that was kind of like, you know, put away. And it kind of goes to
Yeah.
what you were saying. There were well developed languages, people, cultures. There were even evidences of older, more advanced cultures in the Americas, but that didn't fit what was going to be done later. So they just kind of had to put that away. And like you said, they're bringing in a different way of worship, which is probably derivative of what you had anyway. you know,
Yeah.
so they're kind of taking it and bringing it back to you. And it's the same discussion that's gone on with Pan-Africanists and people like that. Different nations in Africa have a concept of one God and stuff like that before the Europeans came. Or were they bringing stuff back that we already had in the same? So it's really interesting. I think it's an exciting time for writers, particularly if you have a heritage that is from some of those countries. There's a rich history that's waiting for writers to bring to life. There's no reason that you can't have something that's just as grand or even grander than Game of Thrones or Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings, but it's all set there. It's all set here. It's all set there. And that's that big thing that's going on now. People talking about all the stories have been told. It's like, no, they haven't been told, you know? So it's very interesting that you mentioned that.
Well, yeah, my a thing my dad used to always say was the Mayans were studying the stars while the Europeans were learning how to use utensils, kind of thing. And it's like something I always thought was funny, but the older I got and the more I learned of like our history,
Mhm.
I was just like, yeah, I guess, maybe these people were scared, or, it's just, here's coming to a new world, or here's, they with a people that may or may not have a greater knowledge of what's happening. And what do most people do when they are confronted with something they don't know? They want to bring it down. And I guess it makes sense. Let's destroy what advancements are there and put in what we have, what they have instead. um but I guess, on like a slight aside, there's the new Wakanda Forever movie, which features Namor, and not as an Atlantean, but from a specific group of Mayan, the Talocan, um, which I guess is like like kind of like a water-based underworld. And I absolutely loved having the Mayan like people represented in such a real way on a huge, Hollywood major motion
Mhm.
picture. I thought it was phenomenal, and it was a really great way for the majority of the world to kind of see what we went through, because
Mhm.
that's not a story that's told very much.
Yeah, it really is. But you know, the thing I found odd was that they didn't just go ahead and let Namor be Atlantean, because believe it or not, many of the early Europeans thought Atlantis was located over here in that
Mm.
area. And so that's why I found it very odd that they decided not to let him be from Atlantis, but Europeans themselves actually speculated. I think Plato actually speculated that Atlantis was here, that they had a great
Mm.
navigation university. There's a sea change I feel like that's coming, and that's why I'm so excited for young writers like you who have a connection, a heritage, a lineage, that all of this stuff is finally coming out and it's just begging for stories to be set and told. You talked about your inspiration. You have a lot of inspirations.
I'm very easily inspired. I don't know. I have a big soul and just, find a inspiration in a lot, even something as simple as just looking outside the window.
Well, let me ask you this, and I think you kind of covered it, but what do you hope to accomplish with this book? What's the message that you want people to receive?
Well, definitely, I am trying to kind of help people think more about how they view religion. Any individual that wants to worship in however they want, that's fine. But I do know a lot of people like pressing that onto other individuals, and kind of the message in the story is like, you know, this is what happens when you push your personal views onto another people. I'm trying to warn people of that and warn people what the corruption of power does. Which I know. For many years, I've been kind of saying a lot of things about how our country is ran, and a lot of it, people don't really like put too much stock into, but I guess a silver lining with having our like recent president of Donald Trump is it's opened a lot of people's eyes to all the things that I've been saying for years
Mm,
of, like what our leaders are, what they're trying to do.
mm,
And um, there's definitely good people out there that want to lead. But it's just when you're put in such a big position of power, it has drawbacks to it. Yes, it's not like a thing that you can prevent, so to speak, by reading my book, but I feel like it can help, open eyes in a way.
awareness, stimulate thought, which is what happens to you. Your thought and your questions are stimulated and you seek answers. So maybe that's what your
You know,
book will do for people, to cause them to start to think
mm.
and question.
and I think also like another big thing is I heavily believe in balance and the idea that there isn't I guess speaking of balance, there is no straight, black and white. There is no good versus evil. And that's kind of like another theme in this story that everyone is doing what they believe is right. Each person is their own hero of their story. And you know, there's that's good to an extent, but unfortunately, that does conflict with other people's versions of what they think of what being a hero is.
Mhm.
And that's kind of why I like Star Wars so much because it more so the books and I guess like especially like the Clone Wars, anything that's not the movies, I guess, has that really great example of there is no good and evil. It's just kind of your perspective and what you are doing to accomplish that.
Mm.
Because I know while writing this, I had that idea in mind. And as I started working on the antagonist more, I realized like I kind of made the antagonist an underdog in a way. And at first I was a little upset that like, oh, now my bad guy isn't so much of a bad guy. But then again, I guess no one is. And so it became perfect because it helped align more with my own views on
Mhm.
humanity. on life.
So is there hope for us?
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see. We'll have to read the second book to see if there's hope.
Yeah,
Huh? So, I really would like to know, we talked before, and I know a little bit about your story, the 10-year journey, um, times when you
yeah.
wanted to give up, but you kept going. So I'm curious, having gone through that yourself, what would you say to new writers who have an idea, but who maybe falter, put it down for a year or two or more? What would you say to
Mm.
these young writers or artists, period? What would you say to them to encourage them?
As simple as it is, and not to be um, you know, spokesperson or something, but really just do it. I know it's definitely more difficult than that, but also at the same time, it's just as simple. There's always a reason. There's 101 reasons not to do something. I'm not good enough. There's not enough time. Oh, someone else can do it better. But if this is what you want to do, why not do it? Make it happen. There's not enough time. You can always figure out a little bit of time, even if it's just like an hour a day to focus on whatever your passion is. Yeah, but that's like the main thing is not to let your internal doubts cloud you, and to just keep focusing on your prize of that end goal of whether it's to publish a book or record an album. You just gotta keep focusing on that. I know I definitely have been thinking that I'd finish this book, in a few months, and that took about 4 years. And a good amount of that time was, just kind of stuck, in the traditional daily grind of, okay, I got to go to work. I'm
Mhm.
exhausted from work. Okay, I'm just going to distract myself from this, mundane existence, and like, oh, now I got to go to work again, and come back, and you just keep doing that. And it's like, oh wait, wasn't I a creative at some point? And you know, uh,
But you have the book. It's out.
yeah.
It's available. Tell people how they can get the book.
So it's available on most of the usual platforms of Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com.
Mhm.
You can also find it on was it bookshop.org, which they put proceeds to helping local businesses or local bookshops, I guess more specifically. So you can get my book and support some of the little guys that way. For those who are in the DMV area, my book is available at onemorepagebooks.com. They don't have it in stores physically, but you can always order it to be picked up at the store.
Mhm.
And very soon I'll be at the Curmudgeon Books in Glen Burnie, Maryland, which is
Oh,
located
wow.
in Marley Station Mall. And in a couple weeks, February the 11th, I'll be doing a signing there.
Mhm.
And just a month after that, I'll be at the Barnes and Noble Annapolis, March 11th, doing a signing
Okay.
there too. Easy ways to follow me and see what I'm doing.
Mhm.
I have a link tree, which
Mhm.
is linktr.ee/JA_Barrios. There you can follow me on any of the three major platforms of
Mhm.
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which you can also find me under barriosbooks@gmail.com under any of those sources as well. Yeah, as far as Barnes and Noble goes, officially I am in two stores physically, one in Virginia and one in Maryland, the Annapolis location of Barnes and Noble, and Potomac Yard in Alexandria, Virginia,
Mhm.
which was really cool. It's I walked into there to follow up on an order that they had done, and my books were just sitting right there on the shelves. It was super cool to finally see that. That's
I,
exactly what I've
yes.
been looking for.
Yes.
Was it's one thing to see it in my hands, and that blew my mind.
Mhm.
It still blows my mind. But then the next step was like, all right, now I want to like walk into a store and just see it on the shelf. And I got to do that, so it's pretty good.
Well, thank you, Javier, for doing the interview. I really appreciate it. And I'll also include all of those links in the description of the podcast so that people, if they want to, they can directly click on them. But thank you and congratulations.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. Yeah, very excited.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Urban Guru podcast. And of course, you can always find us on iTunes. Just search for Urban Guru and you'll find our podcast listed. You can also listen to this podcast on SoundCloud. Just search for Urban Guru Podcast and you'll be able to find it there too. Thank you again for listening. And remember, no matter whatever your creative endeavor is, always push forward, because every step that you take along that path will lead you to your ultimate destination. So I'll see you next time.